Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome back to the Friendship Quilt Along. Today, I'm quilting the Crown of Scraps block with my new set-down long arm. I have set up my Grace Unique 15-inch long arm on the Qzone hoop frame, and I've set it up as a set-down, so that way I have a little bit more control. I can really focus in on my stitches, and hopefully I can gain a lot more experience on travel stitching and quilting more precisely. So that's my goal, at least. I've decided to quilt this block with a combination of rulers. I'm going to do a ruler design in the border and then some very simple sharp stippling in the center. So let's get started learning how to quilt this block together. So I'm getting started in the center here, and I'm just kind of estimating my space. This is a big deal on this particular frame and this particular long arm because I only have about 10 inches of quiltable space to work in. And I found that I am just exactly right in this area where I can pull the frame down and I'm really tugging on it, but I can actually quilt to the tip of this square. So I'm going to go on ahead and start with some echo ditching around the square. So I'm going to drop my needle in the down position, bring it up, push the long arm over, and then I tug on that top thread. That brings up my bobbin thread, and that just helps it not make a mess on the back of the quilt. Now I'm going to take just a few stitches in place here. Not really in place, I'm kind of moving the long arm ever so slightly. That's going to lock my stitch, so that way the top thread won't pull the bobbin thread to the back and kind of make a mess. Okay, so now I'm working with the slice quilting ruler, and to do echo ditching, I'm just pressing that ruler right up against the side of the foot, and then I'm pulling the machine against the side of the ruler. So it is definitely a tension. There's tension here on my hand on this handlebar. I'm left-handed, so I operate the machine and pull the machine with my left hand, and I control and hold the ruler with my right hand. Now, an important thing, I like to stretch out all 4 fingers over the ruler and hook my thumb here on the back edge, and that kind of pushes against it and stops it from shifting. So here we go. Click the machine back on. And I have my machine set to stitch regulated precise, which is really nice because that means when the machine isn't moving, then the needle stops bouncing up and down. So when I take my hand off of it, it pretty much stops the needle from moving. There's another stitch regulated setting where the needle will continue to bounce up and down. You don't really want that because, like right here, I'm going to take my hand off of it and stop moving and reposition my ruler. This is going to be a little awkward. Whoop, and it's moving just ever so slightly because I'm nudging the quilt around. That's moving the machine. So I want to hang on to it. So I get my ruler in position and then stitch on down. There we go. Most of the time I can say I usually just click off the machine whenever I am repositioning the ruler, and that's mostly, it's kind of one of those things about me. I like to click off the machine more than I think most people because I would rather just not have any chance that the machine continues to stitch when it doesn't need to. But this is something that you can kind of play with and see what you can get away with, You just have to experiment and see when your machine's going to move around a little bit, like mine just did. It just kind of nudged ever so slightly, and that was enough to trigger the stitch regulator to have the needle go up and down. Okay, so back on track. What I did just there is I tied off and buried that thread tail, so that way when I stitch down, then I won't have that thread tail in my way. And you can find another tutorial on how to do that, really nice and detailed. That's at leahday.com/hide threads. And that will guide you through how I tie off and bury all of my thread tails in the middle layer of the quilt. There we go. Nice, beautiful echo ditching. Now, if this is too open for you and you want to go in there and stitch something, now would be the time. Go on ahead and swirl in there and do something fun if you want. I kind of like the idea of leaving it open. I really want this quilt to finish soft and with minimal quilting. I don't want to make it really dense and intense with lots and lots of quilting in it, so I'm going to leave that area open and blank. Okay, so now I want to pull up my bobbin thread over here. So I'm going to needle up, needle down. I haven't broken my bobbin thread. It's still connected over here, but I don't want that. So I'm going to clip it, and then I'm going to go back over here where I have my thread break. I'm going to tug on that, Obviously, my machine is ever so slightly out of level, which is why it's rolling on me. I need to remember to level the feet a little bit, and then it'll stop doing that. It's very annoying, especially when I'm trying to shoot a video and the machine's rolling around. I'll put that as a note. I need to level it. And it's just a small thing. The Qzone frame has leveling feet, and most likely it's just kind of crushed down on my carpet a little bit, and I just need to roll those feet up a little bit, and that will fix that. So there we go. I can tie off and bury that thread break. Just brought that bobbin thread up to the surface of the quilt, tied off and buried that thread break, so that way it's not making a mess on the back of the quilt. I don't have anything that's going to get messy back there that's going to cause a problem. Okay, so what I've decided to do in the quilt itself, in the block, this is the Crown of Scraps block, and I really want a nice pretty design. But as you can see, this is super, super scrappy. If I go in here with something really intense, you're not going to really see it because there's so many printed fabrics, and those are going to compete with any kind of design. So what I've decided is just to fill in this area with a nice open sharp stippling. Again, you've got to check and see how much space you can quilt in. I don't really feel comfortable trying to stitch through this whole area, so instead I'm going to pull up thread right here and focus on stitching kind of up and around the block all the way through to this side. And I'll be satisfied with that. Then I'll have to shift the quilt through the long arm and re-hoop it basically, and that way I can finish off the rest of the design. Okay, so here we go. I pulled my bobbin thread up. Now I'm going to take a few stitches, not in place, I'm just kind of stitching over ever so slightly, and that works great. Okay, so I've got to remember I can maybe like kind of swirl down, but I don't want to try and hit these ditches. I'm not going to be able to make it. I can come to about a 1/4 inch from this area, but I can't actually come down all the way. So I just need to keep that in mind. That's the limitation of my frame and the size of my machine. So here we go. Click the machine on. Sharp stippling is created by doing a wiggly line coming to a point. Now I hit the edge of my frame there, but that's okay. With sharp stippling, it really kind of worked for the design. So this is a good choice. I'm really glad I made this choice for this block. That could have been a mistake if I was stitching stippling. I might have had to rip that out, but I think that actually looks pretty good. So now I'm pulling over to that side. I'm just going to swirl around. Now I am quilting on basically kind of a 1/2 inch scale. And this is another reason to leave the center of this block open and blank, and that is, you know, this area right around it is going to be fairly dense, and I don't want to just keep hitting it with too much quilting. I really want the block to finish nice and soft. I am getting a little bit of bounce, and I think that's because my back rail is running just a little bit high over my quilt. So I'm actually going to click. There's some clamps here on the sides. I'm going to click and open those and drop my back rail. So that just lowered the whole quilt, and hopefully that's going to reduce that bounciness that I was getting. Let's see. Yep, that is already much improved. And what might have happened is I might have been working on a bigger quilt that would have resulted in me lifting that back bar, and that is probably why that was up a little bit higher. And then I switched to this quilt, and obviously it's not taking up nearly as much space, and I needed to lower that and I forgot. So this is just one of those things about the Qzone frame. You're going to need to make adjustments to it, and then remember to adjust it back after you get it done. So there we go. This is looking great. If you can't quite see what I'm doing, please know I also have tutorials on sharp stippling on plain fabric, so you can see what this looks like where it's not being stitched on super, super busy fabric like this. But it's really just wiggly flame shapes. I'm just wiggling down, coming to a point, changing directions, wiggling back, coming to a point, changing directions. And just think of like kind of flames. Think of that center square on fire and the flames stretching out to fill in that whole section. So like here, I'm going to wiggle all the way to that tip, and then I'm going to have that flame shape expand to fill that whole area. That's how it works. That's how it looks really good. Oop, just got a beep. That's when the machine tells me, hey, you're going a little bit too fast. Slow down. So there we go. That's looking good. Now I felt like I kind of tried to push it just a little bit too far before. So I'm going to stitch only that much, come over here and stop. And I think that's plenty of quilting. I can now advance the quilt through the hoop, and that's going to allow me to stitch this lower area. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I need to advance this block through my hoop frame in order to quilt the remaining section. So what I'm going to do is take off all of these clamps on the back. These are just silver clamps and bungee cords. And then I'm going to remove these back clamps that are holding that in place, and then also remove this front bar. Okay. And now rolling up from the back. Oh, I actually forgot. I've got also these side clamps penned here, so I need to remove these pens because otherwise the bungee cords are going to hold that in place. Just place those pens there and there. Take those out. And now I can roll up the quilt easily. So just roll, roll, roll. And I need to just check out and see where I am. I basically quilted my sharp stippling to this point. I want to make sure that maybe I could pull up here or pull up here and then finish that whole area. And then I know I'll have plenty of space to be able to quilt all the way down. So I think I'm going to clamp it up right here. Just grab that bar. You can always adjust it after you get it set. If you decide, oh, that's not quite the right spot, then just pull off the clamp and shift it down just a bit. That's just fine. I think that looks pretty good. If I pull my machine back, I can check it. Yeah, I think I can quilt all of that in one go. And I can also pull my machine forward and double check. Yep, I can quilt all of that. Well, I might not be able to hit that border. Let's see. Let me come out, actually steer the machine over the quilt and be sure. Yeah, I'll be able to quilt that whole border. So this is just kind of my thought process whenever I'm advancing on this hoop frame. It's just a little bit different from my continuum frame. So I always double check. I take a little bit more time, and that's just going to ensure that I don't have to do this whole 9 yards again to do maybe one line of quilting, So it's always good to just take that extra second, double check the placement of the machine, and make sure you can stitch that whole section. Okay, now I'm going to pull this nice and tight. I'm just tugging this down. Then I place my back bar and then give it a rotate. That looks good. And then you can kind of pick up the block a little bit, fluff it out, make sure everything's nice and stable, and then I'll reset my side clamps. So here I just take my leader cloth. I go on ahead and take that off the clamps so that way I can pin it on nice and straight. And I'm just using nice long arm pins. These are they're meatier bow-end pins, and you cannot bend them. Like, they're not like the soft patchwork pins. They are really sturdy and firm, and I like that whenever I'm doing either pinning the leader cloth or pinning the leader cloth to the sides. I don't want bendy pins for this area. So this is not the same type of pin that I use for basting when I'm basting a quilt. For home machine quilting, it's not the same type of pin. I call these long arm pins. Okay, there we go. And you can find these bow-end pens on my website at leahday.com. You can find them linked up at leahday.com/grace. All right, let me steer this machine over and just double check, because obviously the quilt's in place. And look, I actually can quilt off the edge of the block, so I really like that. And I'll also be able to reconnect with my sharp stippling too, so looks great. So as you can see, it doesn't take a lot of time to reclamp a block. It's the same process whenever you're doing any sort of baby quilt that you can quilt through the entire hoop. It's whenever you are quilting something wider than the hoop that you need to do a side-to-side shift, where you shift the quilt from side to side here. And I have another video on doing that, so make sure to check that out if you're interested at all in being able to quilt a bigger quilt, something that takes up more room than the hoop frame. Okay. This looks great. All right, so I'm going to reset everything and we'll get back going on this sharp stippling. So I decided to pull up thread here because I ended up with just this kind of a weird end to my sharp stippling, and this little pocket left open. It was kind of an accident. I thought I had more space to quilt in than I actually did. So easy mistake to make, but I can fix it by pulling up thread here and starting my design working from this area. And so you can see I'm just locking my stitches, not by stitching in place. I'm pulling the machine over ever so slightly, so that way I'm actually making 3 or 4 stitches in that area. And now I'm just going to wiggle my way out in just a single line, and then go into making a point. There we go, just like so. So that was very, very easy way of filling in that area and filling in that gap, not making it weird by trying to stitch in and out of it, just by swirling out. That really was the best solution. Okay, so now I'm just making this nice and interesting as I swirl around and down. I really like to kind of make curvy flame shapes, kind of double them up. Like here, I'll just kind of make a second flame. I like that a lot whenever I'm stitching sharp stippling. And I would say don't worry, about bringing your lines a little closer together occasionally. You can see I'm sometimes bringing them nice and close together, sometimes further apart. That's okay. That's kind of like your signature on the quilt. It's okay for it to have some variation in there. And it can go a little bit more dense because we are leaving so many spaces on this block nice and open. The quilt block is still going to finish nice and soft. It's still going to feel great on a bed. Okay, I want to kind of match this up. I don't necessarily need to end in the exact same spot, but I don't want to leave any weird gaps. And I think that was the best solution. So I just came in, wiggled out, filled in that spot, and then I just had this little pocket, one little flame shape, finished it off. Perfect. Okay, so I wasn't sure if I really explained how to break thread. The first thing to keep in mind is that a long arm doesn't lose tension. So whenever I need to pull the long arm away, I need to tug on the top thread just a slight bit in order to be able to pull the machine away. Okay, so now I'm going to actually cut my top thread. So I just cut that with scissors. This long arm does not have an automatic thread cutter of any sort. It's very, very simple. No bells or whistles or fills here. This is very, very simplistic long arm. Okay, now to break my bobbin thread, I could reach under and kind of dig at that thread and try and find it and clip it. But that's kind of a pain. So instead what I do is I just pull the machine away and then needle down, needle up. Okay, that pulls up a loop. You just tug on your top thread and that pulls up a loop. That loop is your bobbin thread, and as you can see, it's still a line of thread. It's not going to be broken. So I just clip that, and now the bobbin thread is broken. So I pull the machine away, that pulls that thread tail back through. Now I can tug on my original break over here. That's going to pull up a loop. You just kind of pick at it a little bit, and that will pull both thread tails up in the exact same spot. You can tie them off and bury them right here. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit of a new process that I've been playing with, but it definitely makes things a lot faster and easier. All right, so I've decided to pull up thread over here to start my ruler quilting. And this is more echo ditching like we did in the center. And I like to go around these boxes. I mean, they were really fun hourglass squares to piece. And now I really want to make them stand out and show off. So I'm taking my ruler and pushing it right up against the ruler foot, lining it up with that ditch, that seam line on the quilt, just like so. Now I've got to eyeball where this should end. So I need to actually look at the edge of the foot here, and wherever the edge of that foot is lining up with this seam line, that's where I stop, reposition, rotate the ruler around, and you might be able to see this, that the ruler isn't exactly in the perfect spot, so I can just nudge it down a stitch or two, and then I'll be in the right spot to stitch this way. So it's this direction change that can be a little tricky just to see it and know exactly when you've stitched down far enough to make that turn. When you're doing the inside pocket though, that's a lot easier because of course you've got the seam allowances surrounding your foot on both sides. So you just have to kind of eyeball it, come on down, try not to overshoot it, and then it's okay if you undershoot it. You can just take one more stitch. Just use the ruler to nudge the foot over one more stitch, and then you're good to go. There we go. And as you can hear, I am clicking the machine on and off with each direction change, but I do have it on the right setting. So let's see if I can just leave the machine in place, reposition the ruler, and get back to stitching. Yeah, it just makes me a little anxious to do that, quite honestly. I think it's easier just to click the machine on and off. And it really doesn't take that much time. You know, click it on, click it off. That way you're sure that you're not going to sit there and stitch. You know, the needle's not going to be bouncing up and down in place, which is going to cause a hesitation not to show up on the back of your quilt. Don't really want that. So I think it's just best. Click it on, click it off. Don't worry about it. There we go. And this also gives you an opportunity to smooth out the quilt. If something's looking lumpy or bumpy, you don't want to stitch it that way. You want to go on ahead and take the opportunity to smooth it out nicely. There we go. And then also shift your body around. If things aren't feeling quite right, maybe you're sitting in an awkward position on your chair. Maybe you've stitched far enough down that you need to actually roll your chair over. If you're doing set down long arm quilting, then make sure to always be checking in on how things feel, so that way you're not sitting in an awkward position for too long. Okay, now one part of the design that you might not like is that this echo ditching is coming in and overlapping the inner star, the crown of scraps. I kind of like that. I think it's rather cool. But if that bugs you, then of course you can come up with a different design. That's always open to you. You kind of have to think about what your opinion is on the quilting design, and if something bothers you, kind of ask yourself why, and then that's going to help guide your design. That's going to help guide the style that you like and where you want to go from there. I always really am encouraging students to start developing opinions and think about what bugs you, because really, paying attention to that really helps you start to understand more about quilting and what you like to see on your quilts and what you don't. So as you can see, this is a little on the slow side, but it's really going very quickly when you think about, if I was on a home machine, I'd have to be rotating the block with each one of these. If I was doing this with a walking foot, I might even be rotating a lot with my ruler foot on a home machine too. So really, I do think that this is quite quick and speedy, and I really love this effect. So I'm going to come back around. It's always a little awkward when you have the ruler positioned kind of to the back like that, so just watch out for that. You just want to make sure that the ruler's not going to slip. When I'm going to go forward, like in this position, then I usually cup my hand around the ruler, and then I always hook a thumb around the edge. It's just going to make sure it doesn't slip. It's also a little tricky when you're going backwards and you can't see where you need to stop, so just aim not to overshoot it. That's the biggest piece of advice, I think. There we go. And anytime it feels awkward, if that doesn't feel quite right, bring your arm around, see if that feels better. That actually feels worse. But you never know. You really never know what grip is going to give you the right feel. So try several different things. If something isn't quite working and you don't like it, then try several different grips of the ruler before you go with it. And the number one key, I would say, with ruler quilting on a long arm is to keep the long arm and the ruler in contact. Of course, this is a style of free motion quilting. As you saw, I was able to quilt sharp stippling with this ruler foot just fine. It's a style of free motion quilting, so you can do everything that you can do with normal free motion quilting with this foot. But when you're using a ruler and you're wanting to get it to guide that perfect straight line, the two have to remain in contact. You have to keep the ruler and the ruler foot together, and that's just a combination of two hands. You're keeping the foot moving with your dominant hand, and you're keeping the ruler on the quilt and in place with your non-dominant hand. And it's just keeping those two together. That's the key to ruler quilting. Okay, so I have one more line to stitch. I think you get the concept though. I'm just going to stitch around this border with more echo ditching using my slice ruler as a guide. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot and you're excited about giving these designs a try. If you'd like to learn more about the slice quilting ruler that I use to do this echo ditching, you can find it at leahday.com/slice. And of course, you can find all of the different products that I carry for Grace Company, the Grace Qunique 14 Plus or 15R, the Qzone hoop frame that I'm quilting on in this video. You can find all of that and more at leahday.com/grace. I am a Grace dealer and I absolutely love these long arms and frames. And if you use the coupon code Hello My Quilting Friends, you can save $100 on your Grace long arm or frame purchase. So come and check that out at leahday.com/grace. Until next time, let's go quilt.